Hello everybody, welcome back to another election prediction video. This is my final 2024 election prediction, and we're just going to get into it. Originally I was going to wait for Ralston to make the call in Nevada, but he's just taking forever, so I'm just going to make that call in Nevada later in the video, just based off my own analysis of the data, so I'm not relying on his call because he's just taking too long at this point. But let me just go through and set up the safe red states and safe blue states. These are states that I consider to be over 10% margins. Also, if you're new to this channel, you enjoy political videos like this, I'd highly recommend subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I think you would enjoy my content because I typically like to look at elections, and if you enjoy the type of stuff, you should totally subscribe. Alright, I think I set up all the safe blue states and all the safe red states. So let's just get right into it. We'll start off with New Mexico and Virginia, and we could just take a look at the early vote. So far, Democrats have pretty good leads in both of them. I mean, people may say the Republicans are doing good in the early vote in Virginia. I don't think that really is predictive of anything. I still think Virginia's going to Harris by 7. Same with New Mexico. Let me make sure. I got margins on my phone for president as we go through these. So New Mexico goes to Harris by about 8%, while Virginia's about 7%. Both are likely blue states. Heading over to Alaska, I think Trump's going to win the state by about 8 points. That's currently in line with what the polls are saying here. It's also a ranked choice voting state, so if Trump's under 50, it goes to a second round. The state of Maine is also a ranked choice voting state, and I currently think Harris will win the state of Maine by 8 points. New Hampshire, I think, goes by a 7-point margin. Maine second, I think Trump wins it by about 5%. I think it's a small reduction in support in this district. So let's keep on going through this map. We'll finish up the districts right here. Nebraska's first and second. Most polls actually have Harris leading by an 11-point margin and Nebraska second, so I currently think she takes it by that margin. Nebraska's first. Most polls actually have this as a likely Republican district. It's under 10 in most of this polling. I believe that Nebraska's shifting left at a pretty solid rate at this point, so I'm putting this down to a likely R district. In Kansas, we did have a weird poll where Democrats were actually only down by 5 here. It was a 48 to 43 margin. Again, there's so much undecideds there that I think they just go to Trump anyway. I mean, we could take a look at the early vote, and Democrats aren't doing the best here. They're down by 19 in the early vote, so I think Kansas is just safe red. I don't think it's going to go under 10, but it could. It's something to keep an eye on, but I really doubt it. The state of Florida. This is a state Trump's going to dominate in. In the early vote, Republicans are leading by 11 points, and it'll probably get worse than Election Day for Democrats in the state, so I think Trump wins Florida by about 12, which is a safe Republican margin. It's a safe red Florida. Moving over to the state of Texas, I currently think it goes to Trump by a 5-point margin. I think most polls are saying it's going to go to Trump by about 8. That's interesting. I thought it'd be about 7. I think it's going to be a bit smaller than that just because of the overall urban trends in Texas. We are seeing very high urban and suburban turnout in Texas, which is good for Democrats. That's the areas where they typically do well in the state. So I think it's only going to be a 5-point margin for Trump, similar to 2020, which was a 5.6% margin. So a likely red state. The state of Ohio. I do think Trump only wins here by about 8 points, which is good news for Sherrod Brown. He could actually win in a scenario like that, and that's what most of the polls say. So I think it's an 8-point margin. In Iowa. Now, this is going to be a big take here. But the Seltzer poll said Trump is down in Iowa to Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris is actually leading by 3 into Iowa, according to the best pollster in the state of Iowa. That usually is only off by 1 to 2 points, so that's something to really consider here, and that really reduced Trump's margin in my previous predictions, because in Iowa, I used to have Trump winning by about 8. Now I think it's a lean Republican state. I'm going to make that bold take right here. I think Trump only wins Iowa by 4%. I think we're seeing a shift. independents are massively going to Harris in this state, and both campaigns didn't even put money into Iowa. So it's literally just how they're reacting to politics in general. And they just recently had a 6-week abortion ban go into effect. So women are massively swinging to Harris in the state of Iowa right now. So I'm putting this as a lean Republican state. I think he's only going to win it by 4% this time around. In Minnesota, Harris picked Tim Walz to be her VP. That's definitely going to have an impact here. I think she wins it by about 7, similar to Biden's margin last time around. I don't think it's going to go down to a lean blue margin. I don't think that's accurate. And now I think we're down to the other 7 swing states. I do consider Iowa a swing state in this prediction. That's why I had it in yellow in the thumbnail of this video, because it is a lean Republican state, which is a swing state by my definition. Again, doubt Seltzer at your own risk, because typically they're not far off from what's going on in Iowa. So that Iowa's a state to keep an eye on in the 2024 election. I'm saying it here first. We'll see whether her reputation holds after the election, but I really wouldn't doubt her that much. But I still think Trump will take the state of Iowa by 4. I think he's very likely to win it, like an 80% chance. But we'll get into the 7 swing states. Michigan and North Carolina, I think, are the most likely swing states for each of the respective campaigns. They're both lean states. I think Michigan goes to Harris by about, let's see what I got written down here. I think it had, 2%. She wins Michigan by about 2%. She's actually doing very well in the early vote here, especially with a very high turnout in Detroit. We even had a Republican pollster say they were undersampling black voters in the poll, undersampling women. And they said Michigan's probably more blue than what the polls are showing. Their own polls that were showing Trump up. But even one of their recent polls showed Harris up. So I think Harris is in a very good spot to win Michigan. I would be shocked if she were to lose Michigan on election night. In North Carolina, it's sort of the same thing. I think Trump's very favored to win in North Carolina. He could lose it, just like Harris could lose Michigan. North Carolina's only R+1 in the polls, but in the early vote, Republicans have a narrow advantage over the Democrats, which usually isn't good. You want the Democrats to have like a 5-point lead in the early vote to win North Carolina, but the other total is the highest total here in North Carolina, 35%. A lot of that's just due to young voters who are registering as unaffiliated or independents. So North Carolina is a state to keep an eye on. We'll get results there early on, same with Georgia. But I think Trump's favored to win here. I think he's going to win the state of North Carolina by about, what did I have written down? 1.5%. So Trump gets a 1.5% victory in North Carolina as of right now. Yeah, I think about 1.5. I don't know. Maybe it's 1.5 or 1. I got to recheck what I wrote down here. I have it as about a 1% victory. I just misread the number there. But yeah, I think a 1-point victory. That's just over a tilt margin in North Carolina. But it's a state to watch early on. If Harris wins the state, she's most likely winning the election and will get an early call for it that night. So keep an eye on this state. So he wins it by 1. In Georgia, polls currently have this as more of a better spot for Trump than North Carolina. I disagree with that. I really disagree with that because Georgia is a much blacker state. The urban turnout in Atlanta has been great in Georgia for Democrats. And we really don't know the racial makeup of the state because there's a lot of others in the racial makeup that a lot of those others are actually black people. So that's really good for Democrats. Even though black turnout's down from 1% from 2020, it was 27, and now it's only 26%. We don't know the actual makeup of it because of that high other total. And another thing is even the right-leaning polls only have Trump up by 1 or 2 in Georgia. So it's very conceivable she can win it. New York Times also said Harris is winning Georgia by 1 as well. And with the Atlanta turnout being ahead of the statewide average in Georgia, I think Harris is in a very good spot to win it. And I just want to say the early vote here is modeled by Target Smart. This is not actual party registration because there is no party registration in Georgia. They have open primaries. So I actually think Harris is a favorite to win in Georgia just based off that very high urban turnout we're seeing in Atlanta and its surrounding suburbs. I think it looks very good for Harris right now, and I think she's actually the favorite to win Georgia because I think we're going to see black voters turn out on election day by a pretty good amount. I also think that's going to happen. So I have Georgia as a tilt blue state. She wins it by 0.5%. I'm going against what the polls are saying in Georgia. This is a bold take, but I really think she's going to win Georgia this time around. It's the stars are aligning, especially in that last week of early voting for her. The stars are aligning for her in the state. We're going to head to Arizona, Nevada up next. In Arizona, it's probably one of the more harder states for Harris to win. The hardest is North Carolina, but Arizona, the polls are the worst for her in this state. The registration numbers, the Republicans have a 200K turnout advantage just based off the early vote. They're probably going to hit 300,000 after on election day. And once you get to 300,000, it's very hard to see how Harris could win Arizona just based on my own calculations, like assuming Republicans like 9-10% of them vote for Harris. It still isn't enough in a 300K turnout advantage scenario unless independents massively break for Harris, which right now I think she wins like 55-56% of independents, which really isn't enough if Arizona is a 300K turnout advantage for Republicans. So I have this as a tilt Republican state. So Trump flips the state from 2020. Now in Nevada, I originally was going to wait for Ralston to make his call on Nevada, but he says it's just going to come out later today, so I'm sick of waiting, and I'm just going to make a call on it right now, just based off the early vote. Republicans have an advantage here. It narrowed a little bit. They did probably eat away a bit of their election day turnout as well. It really just depends on how the independents break. If they break in a big enough margin for Harris here. So it's going to be a close state. But just based off the Republicans' early vote advantage in Nevada right now, I'm going to have to give it narrowly as a tilt Republican state to Donald Trump. But again, it's only 6 electoral votes. It doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme. It only matters in a few election scenarios here. But I still think the Senate race in Nevada goes blue, which is good for Democrats. And now we're down to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I do think one of these states will be the tipping point state. In most scenarios, it's most likely Pennsylvania. In a scenario where Georgia goes red, it's most likely Wisconsin. So your guess is as good as mine. Maybe it is just going to be Pennsylvania if Georgia's going blue. That's kind of what I think now. I think Pennsylvania will probably be the tipping point state here on this map. But we'll go off with Wisconsin first. The early vote looks really good for Democrats in Wisconsin. I'll just say that first. They have a pretty decent advantage in Wisconsin. I've seen a lot of analysts talk about how it looked good for Democrats in Wisconsin. And the polls typically in Wisconsin aren't the best. They were better in 2022 than previously thought. In 2020, they massively overestimated Democrats. But even Trafalgar says Harris is winning the state of Wisconsin. So even this right-leaning pollster is saying she's up in Wisconsin because they want to preserve their rating. So I do think Harris has a narrow advantage to win the state of Wisconsin. I do think she's the narrow favorite to take this state. But that still isn't enough. She needs to win Pennsylvania to win the election. Right now, I think it'll probably be the tipping point state. And Pennsylvania's literally dead even in the polls. Let's just 0.1. That's his lead in the polling average. So, wow. That's insane how close it is in Pennsylvania. It couldn't be closer than that. But these are just a lot of right-wing polls only show Trump up by 1 or 2 points here. So even the right-leaning polls are saying it's going to come down to the wire. And I do think the Pennsylvania firewall is going to hold. We've already seen it pretty much hit 493K votes with independents factored in. It's probably going to hit 500K with indies factored in tomorrow. So I think Harris is in a good position in Pennsylvania to take the state. Late deciders are breaking to her. Every pollster is saying that late deciders are actually going towards Harris. She's closing out strong. That's where you want to be. at the end of the election. You want to close out strong. Trump's final messaging is like all over the place. It's really muddled. I don't think he's running a good enough campaign in these last few days. He's just all over the place. Harris is just focusing. She's on message. She's campaigning very hard, and I think that's really going to matter in these last few days, and it's going to be enough to give her a win in the Electoral College. And I do think polls are underestimating her. I don't think she's going to only win the popular vote by 1%. I think she's going to win the popular vote by 2.8%. I think the polls are pretty off. That Seltzer poll kind of confirmed that, in my opinion. She's usually pretty good with telling how the country's swinging. And I really do think polls are overestimating Donald Trump this time around. I think pollsters are scared of missing him, and that's why they're hurting, showing a tied race. They might be just weighing down the data, just make it a tie. So if one of the other candidates win, they could just claim, well, technically we were right. We preserve her rating. But I think Harris is in a good spot to win 286 electoral votes. She wins a popular vote by 2.8%. And yeah, this is my final 2024 election prediction. Trump wins 4 out of 8 swing states, while Harris wins 4 out of 8 swing states. And yes, I am counting Iowa as a swing state because it is lean Republican. That's just in my definition. It's a swing state just because of that Seltzer poll. But yeah, this is my final election prediction. Let me know what your final election prediction is in the comments below of this video. And let me know which states you have going to either side. Include the 8 swing states and how they go. And margins too, if you want. I'll read through every comment here. And if you're new to this channel, highly recommend subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, let's just look forward to the election tomorrow, November 5th. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.